You're listening to Legends Library. Now, here's your host, Liisa and Kyle Rawlings.
Hi, everybody. I'm Liisa.
And I'm Kyle.
And you're listening/watching to Legends Library. We are a podcast dedicated to the Legends line of the Star Wars books and the expanded universe. And we have returned. Yay!
Yeah.
We finally have managed to get Kyle back in the recording chair. He has been extremely busy with supernatural encounters, which he'll kind of give you guys an update about it. I've been personally... I kind of vapor gassed myself recently, so I have been unable to talk for a little while, and I'm still kind of living with the the consequences. So you might hear it in the recording, where my voice is a smidge different, and I may not be able to breathe all the time. Life is fun, so yeah. So I also do just wanted to give a quick little shout out to a friend of mine, Kyle. You don't know him, but he's one of our regular listeners. My friend Pat, who has been in the hospital. He went into a coma and broke his hip and has had a stroke. And Pat, we're all thinking of you, and I appreciate that you're always here. And when I went and visited in the hospital, he asked if we had made another new videos. And I said, not yet, Pat, but so here we are today. So hi to you, Pat.
Get well. Get well, Pat.
So Kyle, if you can give us a bit of an update on what's going on with supernatural encounters.
Well, it's at the presses, so party time.
Woo!
Yes. After several mitigations that had to be made, everything is going to press. So Joe is currently looking over the soft and hardcover editions, like the prototype, so to speak, working out any other kind of things as far as certain lighting and the artwork, all of that. It's down to those details, but the prototypes are there, and so once he works out what remains, then it's on.
Yeah.
So shooting for that March release.
Okay. Which
Yeah,
is
if not April, as far as like however fast the mail system works, then that's going to be determining all that. But yeah, because it's going to go around the globe, of course.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Whoever has ordered a copy. I know that Joe and I, because I've talked to him occasionally, we talked about getting an edition created for the Legends Con. So he's going to make some, paper jackets and everything for a special edition. So that's the one that I said, please, can you reserve that one for me? Because I want that one with our lovely logo on it. So yeah, I'm pretty excited. But what are some details you can give us about supernatural encounters now that it's so close to being available for everyone?
Not as much as you would hope, I'm sure. As far as the time that it's taken, we've had to go through it a lot, and once you, I guess, as far as what I guess I'm roundabout way of saying to everybody who's invested their time and efforts and excitement in, is that when it arrives, it's going to be damn near perfect. I mean, really tried.
Yeah.
And every detail is going to show, and it's coming up pretty soon. So I'm hoping that the world's excited.
I'm excited. Remind people kind of just the timelines in the book.
We're talking after Darkness, coming up on Day of the Jedi, and there's that period as far as the present, and then it dances. It's actually, as far as the timeline of the book, we're talking like ancient times too. I'm not gonna actually spoil where anything ends.
Okay. At least the beginning, yeah.
Yeah, you can start Yeah, in the beginning,
Yeah.
actually.
It's the very
Yeah,
beginning.
it's supernatural encounters. Yes, in the first, and some things don't have to be like spoilers because it was already released. The rough draft now, as it's known. But yeah, we're going back to the start of the Sky River Galaxy, what we know is as the Star Wars universe.
Yeah.
Or galaxy in particular.
Yeah. And
Within the universe.
how's the audio drama going? Because you're also in charge of the audio drama.
Yes. Oh, it's going excellent. Actually, we're pretty far along with the narration process, and Robert is doing that process with us, Newsham, and it's going to sound pretty amazing.
Who else have you been recording with?
We have a large group. I'll disclose as far as like everybody's names and stuff soon here. But you're one of them.
I'm one of them. Yay. I mean, how many women are there in Star Wars? Come on, let's be real.
Whoa. There's a lot of women in Star Wars.
I'm just kidding, obviously.
Yeah.
It's a joke from Family Guy when it's like when Mom Martha comes on screen and they're like, look, another woman. And then Lois' character is Leia's like, I don't like her.
So, oh yeah, and I think that there's plenty of ladies in Star Wars. Shout out to Swotorista, one of the board members of Legends Consortium. If anybody hasn't been following along, or if you've missed a couple episodes, Liisa and I are both board members. I'm the co-owner of Legends Consortium. Take it away, Liisa.
Yeah, so Legends Con, guys, it's really ramping up. We've already confirmed a couple guests. So we've confirmed Sean Stewart, first of all, awesomeness. You guys may have remembered we did a Dark Rendezvous a while ago. I learned something about Sean, which I wish I had known at the time, was he actually wrote that book in 2 months. So that explains a few things. And then we have Corinna. She's the writer for Comic Legacy 3. She's confirmed. We haven't officially released it yet, but Joe from Supernatural Encounters, he will be coming for sure, and I think that's super awesome. We have another Joe. I can't say which Joe yet because we haven't technically locked him in, but he's dating one of the board members. So, I mean, she's gonna be there. He's gonna be there. And then we actually, right? My voice is giving out already. We've also actually had a heavy hitter. We're not quite ready to announce who it is. Mostly because we're working out all the details, but he contacted our email saying, hey, like, I've heard about you. I want in. So it's like all of us yesterday were just like big grins on our face, like, it's working. It's working. So it's super exciting.
Surprises as far as celebration of the expanded universe, the true celebration of it, and massive surprises for everyone.
It's super exciting. So if you guys haven't already checked out our last episode where we had Catherine, the executive director, on, where we did, we talked about the Ko-Fi or coffee fundraiser. I keep calling it Ko-Fi now. And if you guys still want to check that out, I also mentioned in that episode that if you enter it and then let us know either through the email legendslibrarypodcast@gmail.com, and I'll throw an extra vote for you guys when we start to kind of get into our Heart of the Jedi book giveaway, which is part of our X-Wing series when we resume it. But we're gonna have
there's an ongoing joke between us, listeners, that we will get through it
somehow, some way. Like
yes, because there's only so much Top Gun that you can handle. I'll say it. I'm just gonna say it, and I love it, but it's just like there's so much, and like topics of what we're going to be covering tonight is going to be the Tenebrous Way.
Woo!
The Tenebrous Way.
Yeah, I am so excited for what we're gonna do tonight. It's gonna be different, but yeah, stay tuned for more LegendsCon. Keep an eye on the Facebook page, Twitter, and the Discord, because I'm always posting more of the guest information and, like all the details about the con. And of course, that's going to be in Burbank, California, September 9th and 10th of 2023. So you can see me and you can see Kyle there, and we can all have a nice chat about Legends and Legends Library and, have a great fun time. So, but yeah, today's episode, we are doing Tenebrous Way, as Kyle mentioned. So I love this story, like, so much. I don't know about you, but yeah, you're nodding. You're nodding.
It's one of the best short stories of them all.
Agreed.
Abel Pena has some that will stand to this, but I do love the story in particular, and it's dark and it's grim, and it's so many explanations about midichlorians that, frankly, like, there's a lot of information in the lore, but the amount that's packed into the story,
yes,
that we get, it's wonderful.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and of course, so when I first came across this was when we did Shatterpoint on Legends Library, and I was like, I want to know more about Matthew Stover because, wow, his writing style just blew me away. And I saw like the entry, like the little like, oh, he also did this, and of course it's in the Star Wars Insider magazine, which I own no copies of, like, because I joined Star Wars Legends a little bit later, and I managed to get a friend to download a copy, and I was like, I just need this story. I wish he had given me the whole magazine, but then he sent me screenshots. So that's been my experience of Star Wars Insider, which has been pretty limited. But you have a copy of it, so I'm very jealous.
yeah, the only things that I collect with the Legends banners are just things that weren't done in the past. That's it. So the volume 1 of the fiction collection, which they named, very odd, but yeah, all the same, I'll be reading from this. They did a very nice layout with the artwork, I must say. So yes.
Well, so let's get into our book narration, because I love the art. So yeah, the art is by Brian Rood. You can check out his website. I've got it written down. I'll read it at the end.
Full page layouts and stuff. I don't know how much you can see, but
look
there
at
you
that
go.
lovely moon. Oh, doesn't he put a smile on your face?
Yeah, and they made sure to put it on every page. There's the gentleman himself, They'll know what oh gosh, there we go.
There he goes. Yeah.
And it's nice to just be able to hold it and whatnot. Anyway, let's go.
Yeah.
I'm so ready for this book.
So
novella, short story.
Short story, yeah. So what we're doing today, guys, instead of my usual typical reading and then paraphrasing all this stuff, we're actually just going to read it, because I feel that not enough people have read the short story. So why not when in Alderaan?
Yeah. Zing!
So, Tenebrous Way by Matthew Stover. Okay, so now we're going to get finally into our book review. We just had a slight technical problem, which you'll notice there's a break in the edit that that has happened. So, yeah, just a little bit. So, this evening in this podcast, we are discussing Tenebrous Way, which is found in Star Wars Insider 130. This first was published in December 2011. So, this story picks up a little section that's going to be appearing in the book Darth Plagueis by James Luceno. So, and in that story, this basically takes place in 67 BBY, and it's Tenebrous and his apprentice Darth Plagueis, and they've traveled to the planet Bal'demnic, and they're there to kind of investigate a lode of cortosis, and something happens in the cave where the M2 mining probe droid has been sabotaged by the subtext mining, and this is basically what happens from this situation. So, by Matthew Stover. Dying, Tenebrous observed with mild surprise, was turning out to not only be pleasant, but wholly wonderful, Had he ever suspected how much he'd enjoyed the process, he wouldn't have wasted all these decades waiting for his foolish apprentice Plagueis to do him in. So even as he lay gasping around the icy barbs that pierced his lung, Tenebrous smiled. Even with the jerking and convulsing of his body's last reflexes rebelling against the fall of eternal night, even as his organ system shut down one by one to maintain the last shreds of light and life within the vast intricacies of his brain massive beyond even those of other Biths, people justly legendary for their intellectual prowess, Tenebrous found himself particularly enjoying the incremental disappearance of his own midi-chlorians. His force perception was even more acute than the magnifying powers of his enormous eyes. In the force, he could feel each individual midi-chlorian wink out in turn, a spreading wave of darkness, like stars eclipsed by the silhouette of an approaching ship, or falling through the event horizon of a black hole. Ah, darkness, darkness at last, the darkness he had dreamed of, the darkness he had planned for, the darkness that was his one true love, the darkness he had taken his name. Was he not Darth Tenebrous? Over to you, Kyle.
His vision dimmed. His hearing became a rush of wind like static on an electrovoter, and then silence. The sole sensation registered by his quivering flesh was the rip of shattered bone and slow suffocation choking his consciousness, as his shredded lung could supply only a fraction of the oxygen required by his massive brain. It hardly mattered. Shielded from suffering by his command of the Force, Tenebrous observed the death agony of his physical form with appropriately Bithan dispassion. And now his impossibly refined perceptions detected the brush of Plagueis' mind as the apprentice probed the vanishing midichlorians of his dying master with his own use of the Force, as Tenebrous had known he would. Tenebrous had spent decades making sure that Plagueis would be unable to resist doing exactly that. Everything was proceeding according to plan. Foolish, pathetic Plagueis. Tenebrous' moon apprentice would never comprehend his own limitations. These limitations were only peripherally due to the unfortunate tendency of moons, as a species, to measure every interaction as a transaction to be manipulated for maximum profit. No, Plagueis' real weakness was fear. Fear so deep and all-pervasive that the fool did not even register it as emotion. Again and again, as across the decades of his apprenticeship, Plagueis had insisted that his fear was not fear at all, instead claiming it to be merely rational prudence. But Tenebrous knew the truth. Had always known it. Tenebrous had chosen his apprentice specifically because of it. Plagueis was afraid to die.
Oh, interesting. So this is a section that I've actually not read because the ripped version I was given was missing 2 pages. So this will be my first time. So this is
Should have came to the source.
I know.
Came to the source.
I know. I always need Kyle. So this was like a reveal for me. Were Tenebrous the sort of individual who could experience pity, he supposed he might feel some for his apprentice. Crippled by dread, Plagueis would never know the freedom of an unbounded will that was the true legacy of the Bal'demnic Sith. And were Tenebrous the sort of individual to be fair-minded about such things, he would have accepted much of the blame for Plagueis' incapacity, as both pity and fairness were entirely alien to his nature, though Tenebrous instead pleasurably recalled the relentless kneading of his apprentice across their long, long years together. He had pricked constantly at Plagueis' sore spot to make certain it would never heal. But, well, that's something we definitely see that Plagueis does to Palpatine, and Palpatine does to Vader.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely their traits, yeah. Not even animals fear death, Plagueis. The lowliest beast in existence exhibits more rational prudence than you ever have. They fear only pain and injury, bright lights and loud noises. You are less than a beast. You are more mere concept and one you do not understand. Thus was the ground carefully prepared. Thus did the seed of Plagueis' fear sprout and blossom into obsession. Thus had Tenebrous skillfully redirected his apprentice's unparalleled aptitude for midichlorian manipulation away from the deepening of insight, from the intuition of the future, and from the amassing of personal and political power away from any and all pursuits that might have been proven inconvenient for Tenebrous' ultimate plan toward a single goal. What a long sentence. A goal Tenebrous had chosen for his own purposes, the mastery of life and death.
Yeah, and it's funny that he that of course it's very much true, but it's one of the general themes of Star Wars is that all Sith fear death
Yeah.
in some way or another. The whole purpose is to master death and be able to transcend it, to continue to manipulate the present.
Mm-hmm.
So always, it's very true and cutting, but it's also incredibly hypocritical, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, more than a century before, when Tenebrous had been when Tenebrous had been but a Sith apprentice himself, the magnificent computational power of his Bith brain had led him far beyond the simplistic Force studies imposed on him by his master. He had always been far too intelligent to be seduced by the traditional Sith metaphysical twaddle of dark destiny and the witless fantasy of endless war against the equally witless Jedi Order. Soon he had confirmed to his own satisfaction the dark side of the Force, far from being some malevolent mystic sentient bent on spreading suffering throughout the galaxy, was in truth merely an energy source, and a tool with which he could impose his will upon reality. It was a sort of natural amplifier he could use to multiply the effectiveness of his many useful abilities. He uses use a lot. None of which was more useful than his matchless intellect. One of my peeves is when people use the same word a couple times in the same
I'm
paragraph.
exactly the same
Anyway.
way. I'm like, yeah, switch up the words.
Anyway, but it is. He's really like focusing on the power of his baseline mental capacity, which is, we're going to see that here in a little bit too.
Yeah.
Like many Sith before him, he had turned his powers toward knowledge of the future. But unlike any Sith before him, he had the enormous brain of his people, which combined sheer brute processing power with a level of analytic precision simply beyond the capacity of any other species. Again, remarking so much on his Bith abilities.
Mm-hmm.
The future was always in motion, and while other Sith struggled to foresee the faintest, least specific hints of what was to come, Tenebrous had no need to see the future. He could calculate it. While still merely an apprentice, his analysis had showed him the inevitable end of the Bainite Sith and its preposterous rule of two. His calculations plainly indicated the coming of a shadow so vast it would darken the galaxy entirely. So vast it would mark the end of both Jedi and Sith as the universe had known them heretofore. The rise of the shadow would be the end of history itself. Tenebrous had not the slightest doubt that the entire galaxy would measure time according to his arrival, and events would be marked by how far they had preceded the shadow or by how long after it they followed.
I like that he talks about the Bainite Sith. So obviously, the Sith that derive from Darth Bane's line. I wish we knew more about those that followed after Cognos and like there's just like that gap in history that we just don't have anything. Then
Yeah,
we get Tenebrous
we
and
have
then
some names.
yeah, like there's
Darth,
a couple here and there, but it's not like
Darth Gravid.
yeah,
Yeah.
but
You
nothing.
get Darth Gravid and like a couple others, but yeah, it's definitely pretty scattered. But anyway,
Yeah, I shall
your turn.
continue. Uh Though the exact nature of the Great Shadow remained occult, the remorseless logic of his extrapolation detailed the coming destruction of the Bainite system, and the rise of what would become known as the One Sith. One Sith! Woo! The conclusion was so
Yeah,
obvious.
knew it.
Yeah, right? The conclusion was so obvious as to require no confirmation. One single Sith Lord would arise of such power that he'd have no need of any apprentice nor fear of the Jedi. He would take and hold the galaxy by his own hand alone. Without an apprentice or a Jedi order to destroy him, the one Sith would rule forever.
Haha.
A heady prospect with only a single drawback. Tenebrous was not to be that Sith Lord. His own death was clearly foretold, entirely inevitable, and it would precede the rise of the shadow by decades. His fate was explicit in the numbers, and numbers do not lie. However, as Tenebrous came eventually to realize over his many years of research, contemplation, and calculation, it might be possible for the numbers in question to be, well, deceived. I like that. The key he discovered lay in an obscure legend obliquely referenced in the Journal of the Wills. What? That's cool. I haven't read this part. About a hero fairly typical in most cultures, the sort of promised future savior who appears in the foundational myths of nearly every developed society. What distinguished this particular savior from his run-of-the-mill equivalents was that he, according to 4 of 11 possible translations, was to be born of pure force. After 3 standard years devoted to specifically exploring all possible permutations of the interpretation, Tenebrous determined that such a birth was indeed possible. At least metaphorically, born of pure force could be read as indicating the creation of a living being through direct manipulation of midichlorian processes in an already living being.
Which we know is Anakin.
What I love about this whole text is like the guy's dying and look how intellectual he still has to be. He's like, I'm still the smartest in the room.
Yeah. And the fact is that he did predict everything, and the shadow can be perceived as what? So many different things, because there's the darkness that, like, you know, could it be Anakin? Sure, the Emperor. Crate at this point too, because he guessed the one Sith, so there could be like a lot of interpretation with that as well.
Yeah. Continue.
Yeah.
And further, as Tenebrous discovered with rising excitement, such a being's force potential might be limited not by its creator own midichlorian count, but instead only by its creator's level of discipline and attention to detail. Indeed, his calculations indicated a range of potentially far beyond his own. With proper execution, the savior might have a midichlorian count as high as 15,000, perhaps even more. It might be possible to create a being with the greatest force potential ever recorded. Remind me, do you remember what Anakin's was? I can't think.
Oh, I wish I could off the top of my head. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Even Yoda doesn't have one that counts.
Yeah. Yeah, it's clearly like potentially Sithari. I'm just saying. Depends on how you look at it.
I mean, however you look at it, whether Anakin was chosen for the light or for the dark, you know, it had to be balanced.
Mm-hmm.
Take it away, Kyle.
So we were at, and by the application of his own.
Yeah.
Yes? Okay. And by the application of his own suitably subtle variation of the ancient Sith brute force essence transfer. Haha. Shout out for the force essence transfer.
Yeah.
Tenebrous could ensure that his own consciousness would be present at the creation of this being, this savior, this chosen one. When Plagueis is manipulating the Force with Palpatine and Plagueis, in the novel Plagueis and all that. So even right then and there, right, him making fun of excuse me, Plagueis that whole time, as far as calling him an animal, like being afraid of death, it's look at him clinging.
Well, and then Plagueis is the one who actually is able to do all this with like his own intelligence, like. Yeah.
So he wants to be there for this moment, and that's important later on. And at the moment of creation, long before the chosen one could hope to resist, Tenebrous would seize it, would become it. With this single stroke, decades after his body's death, he would become the most powerful Force user in the history of the galaxy. It was all there in the numbers. He could not possibly fail.
See, this is what's cool about him. Is like he can't see past any of this. Like he's dying, and he's like, it's still, I'm not gonna fail.
And his confidence and his ability to calculate, we're gonna come back to it. It's gonna pop up in here. Yeah, so once his analysis had been parsed to its nth degree, polished into a gem perfect beyond the possibility of flaw, Tenebrous had devoted every second of every day of his life then to fulfilling his plan. Nothing would be left to chance. He had exterminated his doddering master with his customary efficiency, and had embarked immediately on a decade-spanning quest for an apprentice of his own. And not just an apprentice, but the apprentice. One possessed of a very specific combination of particular skills, primarily surrounding the direct perception and manipulation of midichlorian activity, but also a range of weaknesses, from short-sighted concern with personal profit to an unconquerable dread of the unknown realms beyond the walls of death.
Whenever
An
I see
apprentice
that combination of particular skills, it just like cues Liam Neeson, taken. Like, I have particular set of skills. That's all I thought. Sorry.
No, you're good. An apprentice whose sole purpose was to create the Tenebrous, the being Tenebrous would finally become. So he won. You know what I mean? They accidentally did create Anakin, of course, and all that, but he wanted to be that actual being, which is crazy. He wanted to hitch along for the ride, and then become Bith and transcend. Thus would Darth Tenebrous, the greatest mind in the history of the Sith, be reborn to rule the galaxy forever.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, his plan's pretty good.
Yeah, yeah, I guess you're right. Yeah.
He did steal it from Bane, though. Like, let's be real. Like, his originality is like the essence transfer. Bane tried to do that with Sana and obviously failed, but or did he?
Yeah,
You
it's
know?
an old school techniques.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, obviously he probably knew about it because he's part of the Bainite line. So, they probably talked about it. Or would you talk about it? Because you would have to tell your apprentice, and then the apprentice would be aware of it and then
That's
resist you. So it's like, or did he?
when you're supposed to make the perfect blade, but
Yeah.
you don't want it to be too sharp. There's
Yeah.
the whole argument of the rule of two, right?
Yeah, exactly. All right, so now that his body's physical senses had altogether perished, Tenebrous found his perception of the Force to be proportionally heightened. With glorious precision, he could trace the slightest wisp of Plagueis' clumsy force probing as his apprentice sought to record and analyze every detail of Tenebrous' death. He could feel Plagueis himself, crouched nearby, his eyes closed, the long spiderish fingers of one hand stretched forth as though to snatch Tenebrous' disappearing midichlorians from mid-air. This was Plagueis' customary technique. How very serial killer of him. A close examination through the
Yeah,
Force, right? Like he's crouched, like, I'm over here. Yeah,
yeah. I mean, that's the guy we love him. He's Plagueis.
I
He's
love Plagueis.
all
Yeah, I'd high five
hey.
him.
It's like, yeah. Oh, your life's slipping away. We get a selfie. We love him.
That's funny. A close examination through the Force of the midichlorian decay that accompanied the physical death of his victims. Tenebrous was by far the most powerful Force user whose death Plagueis had the opportunity to observe, and he had known all along that his apprentice would apply all his physical, mental, and Force capabilities, pitiful as they might be, to witness each slightest detail. As though midichlorians somehow embodied the principle of life itself, they vanished as life fled. Plagueis had more than once speculated that they somehow migrated from dying cells and returned to rejoin the Force from which they had sprung, more evidence of the apprentice's muddy thinking and pathetically romanticized mysticism, but no matter. The delusion of the student had proven an inspiration to the teacher, and the concept of midichlorian migration, flawed though it was, became the key to Tenebrous' master stroke. Amidst the billions upon billions of individual midichlorian deaths in Tenebrous' cells were a tiny fraction of midichlorians that were not dying, that would not die so as long as they inhabited a living host. These especially tenacious midichlorians, Tenebrous had privately labeled them with the jesting sobriquet maxichlorian, had been altered, improved. It would not be an overstatement, in Tenebrous' opinion, to use the word perfected. These maxichlorians would indeed migrate, but not into the Force. They would migrate into Plagueis. So this is our first mention of Maxichlorian
Mm-hmm.
ever, which is
Yep.
interesting.
Yeah. And Tenebrous is all kinds of rapey with him, with Mr. Plagueis there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's to be able to continue his consciousness, he's going to pervade Plagueis's body here
Yeah.
with these Maxichlorians. And again, this is the cool stuff though, because we do know some about midichlorians throughout the lore, of course, but it's nice that we get so much right here, especially people who are we're not just learning of it, they were toying with it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
we get a little
exactly.
bit more fun with it here.
Well, and he was one who coined the term Maxichlorian, and he's the only one who ever uses the term because he's the only one ever thought of it and the only one tried to use it and died in the process of using it. So it just never crops up again. So, if you would like to continue.
And I always think too, like when we say that things don't pop up, I'm like, I always think eventually it would have. You know, if things never ended, it would have come back. You know?
Yeah.
Somebody would have
Yeah.
like revisited his work or something. You know what I mean? The possibilities were endless back then.
Oh, for sure.
So these Maxichlorians would indeed migrate, but not into the Force. They would migrate into Plagueis. To detect this, this is where I'm at.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. To detect this infinitesimal percentage would require the precision of a Bith. It was far beyond his apprentice's limited perceptions, and indeed Tenebrous had gone to considerable trouble to ensure it would always remain so. Always underestimating people.
Mm-hmm.
It's a Sith
It's a Sith
Instead of
fault.
actually training his doltish apprentice, Tenebrous had flattered Plagueis' mysticism while pricking his insecurities, sending him off on one useless, doomed-to-fail mission after another. In turn, Tenebrous had invested every available second of the freedom this afforded into designing, creating, and deploying the one weapon Plagueis could never suspect. His own prejudices about the Force ensured Plagueis wouldn't believe such a thing was possible. Tenebrous created a retrovirus that could infect midichlorians. And here we go, down the rabbit hole. Midichlorians were, after all, merely symbiotic organelles that contribute to the organic processes of the living cells they inhabit. Due to their role in Force interactions, altering them was singularly challenging. They had an unsettling tendency to spontaneously express unexpected and unfortunate side effects, much like real molecules do. All right. But by applying the full analytic prowess of his vast Bith brain and the preternatural power of his Bith senses to detect and resolve submicroscopic structure, he eventually succeeded in creating a retrovirus that would transform normal midichlorians into long-lived maxichlorians. So, yes, his virus was to infect, and this was how he improved them. But that was only the beginning.
But that was only the beginning. With the patient, painstaking attention to the slightest, most insignificant detail that was his hallmark, Tenebrous had encoded his custom retrovirus with his most potent weapon, his own consciousness. Once completed, Tenebrous had released the virus into his own bloodstream. It had spread throughout his body, infecting midichlorians in every one of his cells with gratifying alacrity. Not all his midichlorians, though, as the infected maxichlorians no longer fully functioned. To infect them all would have cut his own connection from the Force. A partial severance of this connection was a necessary sacrifice, however, and through an extended process of trial and error, he was able to fine-tune the effect and confine it to one sector of his Force powers he no longer needed, his ability to sense the motion of the future. Dun, dun, dun.
Right. Yeah. Because he thought that he could calculate that.
Yeah. It's all about numbers, right? Like
The vanity.
Yeah.
The vanity. So it's like, all right, cool. I'm going to give up part of myself.
Yeah.
Cut off part of myself. Be able to pull this off. To be able to.
You think that that's the one skill you're like, oh, maybe I won't give that up. The fact that I could see the future, like, and prevent a lot of problems. Like surely there was something
It's
else.
almost like there's a theme here.
Yeah.
With the set.
Yeah. Just idiocy. Yeah, and like he says here, what possible use was the ability to see a future he already knew? Because he was like, I'm already going to take over. I'm so smart. I am so smart. SMRT. Wait. SMRT. I'm quoting Homer Simpson. Let's be real. So crazy.
No.
Yeah. All right. Do you wanna read this part?
Now, dead at last, he could begin to enjoy the fruits of his lifelong labor. In the Force, he could feel that his body had already suffered irreversible brain death, yet his consciousness remained, fully aware, fully functional, and connected to the Force in a manner more intimate than he had ever believed possible. Freed now of the crude biological processes that mark the passage of time, Tenebrous found he could perceive the measured tick of each individual nanosecond while simultaneously comprehending the entire sweep of galactic eons. Besides Tenebrous' corpse, as Plagueis carefully observed the vanishing of Tenebrous' midichlorians, maxichlorians were being subtly and invisibly carried across the intervening space to settle in Plagueis' eyes and mouth, on his skin, and into an open wound on his back, where they entered the apprentice's bloodstream and slipped into his cells, releasing their viral cargo of Tenebrous' mind. Perfect. And what made it even more perfect was that his apprentice would never comprehend the ironic pun of the name Tenebrous had given him. Plagueis, the diseased one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good name choice.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
and he's he's in the middle of it at this point.
yeah.
He's trying.
Yeah.
You want to pick up after this because he's invading Plagueis.
But it's kind of a wild name that like Plagueis never quite clued into his name being Plagueis. Like, why'd you name me that? You know, are you saying I'm a plague? No, you're not a plague. You're just a stupid Sith. like, like, like he has no faith in Plagueis at all, and that's like the wild part of this like situation. And like, let's not forget, he had another apprentice he was training, that other Bith, Venomous, or what was it? Yeah, Venomous, Venomous, whatever his name was. Who obviously failed in the future, like all Biths tend to do, I guess. So, driven by the dark side powered will of the Sith Master, the retrovirus propagated with incredible speed. As it carried his consciousness throughout the apprentice's body, Tenebrous found himself becoming pleasurably aware, how pervy, that he was gaining access to Plagueis' sensorium. He could literally feel what Plagueis felt, both the coldly clinical satisfaction at having successfully engineered Tenebrous' murder, and the forced perception that let Plagueis monitor the last vanishing remnants of Tenebrous' uninfected midichlorians. Full access to his apprentice's forced perceptions. Delightful. Better than Tenebrous had allowed himself to hope. Perhaps he should have invested some time in actually training the foolish moon. Tapping Plagueis' force powers would be more entertaining if they weren't so stunted from disuse. And yet, that's the wild part. He's finally cluing in, being like, oh, maybe I made a mistake here. But I can control this guy's body in the future, so problem solved. Or is it? So as he continued to explore, Tenebrous gradually became aware of the full range of his apprentice's connection to the Force, which was considerably deeper, broader, and more powerful than Tenebrous had ever suspected. He reflected with a twinge of uncomfortable premonition that perhaps Plagueis had been right where he contended that Tenebrous had always underestimated him. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So now Tenebrous touched upon his apprentice's power of foresight, which were also vastly more developed than Tenebrous had believed. For a moment, Tenebrous found his perception cast far forward in time to Plagueis' own death at the hands of his apprentice, who was himself visible only as a smear of darkness, a shadow. I love that line. Just a shadow. Like, yeah, if you want to pick up here.
For an instant, Tenebrous felt the death anguish of Plagueis, and felt the searing agony Plagueis felt at his failure to have created the Force user Tenebrous was to become. He would allow his own apprentice to kill him too soon. This could not be. It could not be contemplated, much less allowed to come to pass. Fury competed with panic as Tenebrous threw his mind at the future, seeking to understand how it was Plagueis could be so complacent and so foolish and so blind. So he sees that he's going to screw it up, and the searing truth was driven home by the gathering darkness to cloud his borrowed foresight. Soon all he could see of the future was a hazy smear of shadow, as the retrovirus he had become infected Plagueis' every cell. The retrovirus he had allowed to sacrifice his ability to gaze forward in time, and had thus robbed his apprentice of his power to sense the future.
Yeah.
Oh, it comes back
It
to
comes
bite you in the butt.
Well, it's crazy because
Giving that up.
yeah, because he gave up the ability to see the future. He only gets it for that one brief moment when he taps into Plagueis, and then screws up Plagueis. So, like, it's just this little. It's such a simple thing that he did, and he doomed the Sith. I mean, they still got Palpatine in the end.
Point of view, he did.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, well, the Sith could have been much more powerful had Plagueis not died when he died. I'm just saying, we don't know. We'll never know. I still think that, well, I've got a theory, but we can talk about that at the end. Are we at
Continue.
which would seal his own doom as well? Yeah.
And had thus robbed his apprentice of his power to sense the future, which would seal his own doom as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
So crazy. Yeah, his single-minded pursuit of eternal life and supreme power had accomplished only this. He would be destroyed by his own triumph. How Sith. How very Sith of them, right? Now,
Yes.
now wholly giving himself over to panic, Tenebrous turned his will upon undoing the damage. This is what's surprising. He actually tries to fix the situation he had done. With all his multiplied power, he yanked his maxichlorians back out from Plagueis' body in a spray of force energy from his eyes, his mouth, the wound, and every other cell. He had to think. He had to find a way out. Perhaps he didn't? Perhaps there wasn't one. Perhaps the best way he could hope was for the slow, inevitable extinction of his consciousness. As his maxichlorians too faded and winked out, then at least he would no longer have to squirm in the agony of self-inflicted defeat. If his maxichlorians were going to fade. Yeah, that's a big if. So obviously, they did. So, yeah. Because it dawned on him that he wasn't sure exactly how long the process should take, but he certainly didn't seem to be losing consciousness. He reached out with the Force. Perhaps he could sense something. Anything. Or even contact Plagueis, somehow make his presence known, as his apprentice would never allow him to survive, no matter how reduced his powers might be. All right, take it away, Kyle.
Plagueis wasn't there. Not only had Plagueis somehow vanished, Tenebrous could sense no trace of him ever having been here at all. What was happening? How could this be? The only trace of organic life Tenebrous could sense were some ancient mummified remains of a Bith.
Crazy.
How long had he been here? How long would it take for every trace of Plagueis to vanish? Those remains were years old, decades, perhaps centuries old. Tenebrous wondered with dawning horror if his retrovirus might have somehow mutated, if its effects on the maxichlorians might go somehow deeper than excision of foresight. What if his eternal life would be this?
Yeah.
Do you want to finish this out here?
Sure.
Or worse.
Or worse. What if his foresight hadn't been eliminated, but had been somehow twisted in upon itself? What if his remains were ancient because this was the 1000th time he had relived this death, and the shattering revelation of his lifelong self-deception? What if this was the 1,000,000th time he had relived it? The 1,000,000th? Then he knew, and at that moment he wished he still had a mouth, because he really, really needed to scream. Dying, Tenebrous observed with mild surprise, was turning out not only to be pleasant, but wholly wonderful. Had he ever suspected how much he'd enjoy the process, he wouldn't have wasted all these decades waiting for his foolish apprentice Plagueis to do him in. I love that ending, how it just goes back right to the beginning with the same words. Yeah.
Door.
And that is Tenebrous Way. Whew. What a story. What a story. But like, okay, so I was thinking, obviously, these Maxichlorians did get through. We can't confirm because this is the only time it appears in the material. So if it did go through, then it affected Palpatine, which is why Sidious was never able to really see that Vader was going to kill him in that moment. Because, like, he seems very surprised when Vader finally picks him up and chucks him off and he falls to his death. Like, he doesn't look like he's, expecting it. Like, or he would have been more killing Vader instead of killing Luke in that moment, just saying.
Really interesting theory, because there's so much that happens when they create Anakin, so to speak. And yeah, that's an interesting theory.
Yeah. Well, even
it's like it's part of Plagueis, so
yeah. Well, even with the other oh my goodness, like the What If comics, the New Hope Infinities, like even in that, he didn't see Vader's going to kill him. Like, obviously it's a known fact that the apprentice tries to kill the master. But again, he didn't do anything to stop it. Like, I always thought that maybe part of Bane's essence transfer had kind of gotten through, but
well, and it's yeah, never mind. Yeah, never mind. Yeah, no, it's just his.
What a story, though. And, like, I love that it's, like, the millionth, the billionth, how many times constantly thinking in this dark, gloomy cave, and Plagueis is long dead, obviously. Like, so is everyone else. Like,
and it's that theme with the Sith, as far as just trying to conquer death, and then the
and realizing death is nice.
Cold dish. Yeah, the cold dish saying, like, well, this kind of sucks, and, like, sure, we did transcend death, but to what end?
Yeah.
And then, half of them always get messed up. They're like, oh, we finally found you, I will ensnare you. And then they're, like, defeated horribly.
Sounds like a lot of relationships.
Yeah. Yeah, cheers to being 35.
Yeah.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy
We're
Valentine's
doing our podcast
Day.
instead of doing that stuff.
Yeah. This has become Kyle and our tradition is to record every Valentine's Day now, instead of ever having to think of any other plans if we're single, because it's just like, no, we don't have to worry about love and being alone with our cats. We got each other on Valentine's Day, and we talk Star Wars. So,
yep,
just the way to do it. Now that we've talked about Tenebrous, just a little fun deviating off the topic. Some of the favorite power couples. I put on Twitter today, like, who's your favorite power couple? A lot of people like Mirex and Corrin, Lando and oh my gosh, I just blanked on her name. Tundra. So who would yours be? Your favorite, not Luke, Mara, Legends couple?
Oh, there's a lot to choose from. I would have said Jaina and Zek. Unpopular opinion, because I really liked where they were going, and then it was so sad when Jaina was just like kind of like, shove off, bro. No, no. My favorite power couple was definitely Anakin and Tahiri.
Oh yes. Oh.
That's always been. It's like a toss up. I loved Ben and Vistara too, but like as far as the absolute like number one, just because of like I love Tahiri and the way that Jason with her
Yeah.
afterwards, and how Anakin dies and that whole like missed opportunity and people say that like, oh my god, they wasted a character, and it's like, did they? I don't think they wasted Anakin at all when he died. Just kind of being on that topic anyway, it's like, has there ever been like that kind of a martyr? And the way that they used him moving forward, it's just like, no, something like that had to happen. It's just like, well, the young one went first, and
Yeah.
um,
I think.
yeah, and I love that. It made everything else believable.
Yeah.
As
His
far as
death
like
is
Han Solo
almost.
like just going nuts, like
Yeah.
the whole thing, everything. It made it all
Yeah.
realistic and tragic and more um yeah, I don't know, like modern day war.
Well, his death
Not
is
everybody comes
more
home.
significant than his grandfather's death, you know? Like, Anakin may have died and, you know, got rid of the dark side for a time, but, for emotions, obviously, Anakin Solo, that hit so many more people. Like, obviously, like, Tahiri went to the dark side because she was tempted by him and, thanks to Jason, and they finally had that. I mean, he did give her that kiss that she so wanted from him, and that was such a hard moment to finally see where, when they do the flow walking scene and she finally kisses them all. Sad. Just thinking of
Yeah,
it.
that's like one of my favorite sections of that book. But yeah,
Yeah,
it's so sad.
it is
It's so
sad.
sad.
Oh, now we're ending on a sad note.
I know. Uh, but as far as like power couples go to, like um the last time that we see Luke and Mara together, and like Mara just like she's already dead, but it just kind of closes out and zooms out like them just talking,
Yeah.
and like that one last time.
Don't forget she was also like, "What woman were you talking to?" And he's like,
Yeah.
"Abeloth, I guess." Like,
He's
oh,
like some
Luke.
other like I didn't get it, and then it was deep and it was terrible.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Ah, Luke. So innocent.
Yeah.
Always the farm boy. And nothing wrong with that. I live on a farm. Just saying. Yeah. But the Anakin Tahiri, I think, yeah, they're some of my favorites. I love the Ben Vistara coupling. I think they would have made a terrific, continuation of the line of
But
stories, and it's
and
very
I
sad we
think that's
don't
where it
get
was
that.
going.
Yeah.
I think that's where it was going. I think Mirta was going to be like the next Boba, um, you know, and they were just going to follow like that Mara and Luke archetype and
Yeah.
with this whole hoorah.
Yeah, like Ben
Um,
as a grand master and always having to kind of keep an eye on Vistara, and then obviously her trying to kill him all the time.
yeah, yeah. I
Sith
think it was going to
happens.
be great. Yeah, stuff happens, like. Psh. Yeah, and they spent so much time building that up too, and it was great. So
Yeah.
that was like that was the next era that we were going to get into. Is like, oh my gosh, there's finally after all this, there's legions of Sith, there's legions of Jedi
Yeah.
in the modern timeline. It's like, not counting Legacy, of course, but it's like shit. And then everything ends, and you're like, and
Yeah.
then they wonder why everyone was so upset. It's like, because it's not even that it necessarily ended. It's just because it was just gone. And
Yeah.
oh my god, we could have just gotten a little bit just to. Hmm. Anyway,
It'll
I
never
digress.
be. In another galaxy, I'm sure, or a multiverse, we got all the answers and all the books, and we can live happily ever after. But it is not. This is not the way, unfortunately. Well, that being said, I'm really happy we talked today about Tenebrous Way. What is interesting with the story is, the fact that they were killed, or sorry, Tenebrous was killed, and Plagueis was almost killed through those actions. It then eventually would lead him to go to Naboo and find his own apprentice. So it all is like this little cyclical thing that's happened, and continuing the Sith, and if you guys haven't listened, I've pushed this before, and Kyle, I don't know if you've done it yet, but the audio drama or the audiobook for Plagueis is so incredible. So incredible. I always push it because I don't know if you've listened to it yet. Have you listened to it yet? Okay.
No, that's one of the few that I've heard like more than twice.
Yeah.
Some of them just are terrible. I'm not gonna lie. Like some of them really are just terrible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just can't.
Yeah.
And like when they're abridged, it
Oh,
just
I
does
know.
nothing for me.
Yes, I agree.
But
I agree.
yeah, most of them you hear like at least once just to. I'm like that person, like, I'll read anything just to say that I've like got it under my belt.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard for me to truly dislike anything, but some are rougher than others. I tried to listen to Death Troopers, and I'm just like,
Oh,
that guy they chose, for example, I can't remember his name.
I haven't listened to it.
By the end, it's like, it's okay because you're so used to it that it works in the horror setting, but for the first, like, few hours, you're just like I'm in the car, and I want to start scraping the glass on my car window because it's going to sound better. And it does, and it's just like, oh, that's getting it out. Oh, that's a stop sign. Just kidding, but
watch the squirrel.
I tease now.
Yeah.
Squirrel!
Yeah, no, I don't like that book in general, so I wouldn't even listen to it.
I love the book.
Well, I
love
hate
the book.
zombies, so it's just not up my alley.
It's deeper than that.
Yeah.
It's zombies, and I get it. Yeah, it is. It's actually not deeper than that, but
they're trapped in
but
the
it was
ship.
a really, really cool story, and like Han and Chewie.
Yeah, but why were they
are
even
in that
there?
book.
It just makes sense why Han and Chewie were there.
Because he didn't read it. Did you read it?
I've read it twice. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was like, what are you talking about? It makes sense that they're there. Yeah.
I just don't remember why they're there. Just felt like they were just kind of thrown in.
Well, yeah. You have to have people that you got to sell the book. I mean, Han and Chewie are like, all right, let's go. Oh my god! Like that's
zombies. Yeah.
That's their rule. They're
Space
like,
zombies.
their rule. It's like, oh shit,
Yeah.
and it's great. And the Havoc.
Yeah.
And they come to the rescue. It's like, I thought it was fun just to watch them be the good guys. If anything else,
They're always the good guys, though.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know.
Well, I mean,
I don't know. It's
maybe
so late.
one day we'll cover the book on here, but it's the last on my list.
We are troopers. Listeners, you will not know, but this took us hours because of all the technical difficulties that we had going on with our internet service. Oh my god.
Yeah, Kyle's internet cut out twice. I was missing a page of the whole the whole material.
You live in the hills of Canada, and I live in the hills of the United States. I mean, it's just
just one
sometimes.
Of those days. And this is what Valentine's is. It's a little bit crazy, a little bit invasive. We get through it somehow. As long as you eat some chocolate, you'll be fine.
Yeah, plenty thereof.
Yeah.
But
so.
All right.
Well, let's wrap this one up. So, Kyle, if you could tell the listeners how they can get a hold of you and what you're going to be doing next.
On Twitter and Instagram, or I'm sorry, on Twitter and Discord, you can get me at Darn Katarn. And then on Instagram, you can get me at LeftHandPath23.
Oh.
Anyway, And what we're doing next, I finally finished the work with Joe. I was the lead project editor for Supernatural Encounters, so that was great. We're finally done. It's at the presses, and now we're working on the audio drama as well as getting Legends Consortium, making that reality this September. It's going to be great. I can't wait until we're able to announce the next guests. We're going to do it on our show too. So yes, be prepared.
Yeah. And guys, tickets are going to be on sale sometime this month, hopefully. But you can kind of get an advance ticket if you check out the coffee campaign. So it's KOS-FI at LegendsCon. I'll post a link here, of course. But yeah, and then if you want to reach out to us, it's legendslibrarypodcast@gmail.com. If you want to send still, Kyle, if you need audio of people screaming, feel free to email that and I'll send it to Kyle, or, reach out to him on Instagram or Twitter. But yeah, and then you can get a hold of me at Liisa Mountain on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. I mean, why would you want to go on Instagram anyway? So weird these days. It's just like all videos. When did it stop being just photos? Like, I don't understand. I don't know. I'm just getting old. But
Yep.
but again, everyone, listeners, thank you for tuning in. I'm so happy that we were able to get the story out and to reconnect. So may the force be with you guys.
Bye.
See ya. That concludes this edition of Legends Library Podcast. To join the discussion, email us at legendslibrarypodcast@gmail.com or follow us on Twitter or Discord at Legends Library. This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for informational or entertainment purposes only. Official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights to Disney and respective copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Legends Library Podcast, otherwise indicated. Legends Library. There's always a bit of truth in legends.